I'm Shane Thomas, and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined by Rick Tatro and Ken Deep, and we are here to analyse Wishworld. And if you have any thoughts about what we'll be talking about, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. So if we just come to the episode rating out of 10 first, Ken, what would you give us out of 10?
I would give this a 7 out of 10.
Okay, Rick, your rating?
7. But depending on what happens next week, I don't know if I can commit to saying that this episode is a 7.
So, Rick, what from it did you like the most?
The visuals. The giant monsters were really cool. The bright colors, the whole look of it was just stunning. And not that Doctor Who is not unknown for that, but it's kind of rare. When I think of Doctor Who, I think of, muted colors and not necessarily an HD experience. And this one just was popping out of the screen. Everything was so bright and so crisp. And I really love the dinosaur things, whatever they were.
Well, I was going to mention this later, but I'll mention it now to piggyback your point. I thought the production design of this episode was tremendous.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned with the color scheme, the settings. I think you think of the design of John Smith and Belinda Smith's home, the neighborhood of their street, the Bone Palace, where the Rani's lair is, the way they've redesigned UNIT to look like an insurance firm. All of that stuff I thought was outstanding in terms of the quality of the actual design and the production values. And it's definitely an example of, we're not with every episode since Disney's come on board, was the Disney financial influence clear to see. You can clearly see it here. This is one of these episodes that you could do this episode without Disney, but it wouldn't look like this, and it would come off a little bit different because you just wouldn't have the money for some of the work in terms of the production design. I mean, obviously, full disclosure to listeners, I'm not recording this from home. I'm in another country right now, having to record this with my phone, so I don't have as much access to my laptop, so I can't look things up as quickly as possible. So I can't look up which is more difficult to look up the production designer for this. If anyone knows, please feel free to chip in, but they definitely deserve a lot of credit because I thought their work was of a real high level. Ken, what from this do you like the most?
I agree. The production design was phenomenal. It gave this fantasy world, it popped. It was definitely a 4K production as opposed to a 2K production, probably from that Disney influence, and it looked every pixel of it. The production design of the Bone Palace I thought was great too. There's still part of me, and this is also going to what Rick was mentioning, until we see part 2, does it sew together properly? Is there a reason for the look of this? Is there a reason for the aesthetic? I'm going to be curious to see how the reality war kind of shapes what we saw in this. Does it continue? Does it have some significance? Or is it just, well, this looked really cool in this episode, and now we're moving on to something else? I like the production design of some of the Rani's helpers with that sort of drippy fingers and
yeah, those were cool.
Yeah, it just had great, tasty visuals, very sci-fi visuals. You wanted to know what was going on.
I mean, as much as I like the production design, it just is a moment that I thought was really effective, and I think the first moment that really had my full attention as far as all what's happening here is the moment when we're in Wishworld. It's still fairly early. John Smith has gone to work. He's talking to, well, I guess it's still Colonel Ibrahim, even though he's probably named something different here, about you should invite Kate out for Chinese food, and then says a very throwaway, "You're a beautiful man," and Ibrahim's like, "What did you just say?"
But she's way out of my league. Oh, she's not. You're a beautiful man. What's that supposed to mean? No. No, I'm just... You're a man. How can you find another man beautiful? Oh, sorry, that was a slip.
First, it's just very much a kind of a stereotypical emphasis on stereotypical 1950s allegory of what the Anglosphere was like. But we haven't thrown in any kind of really overt bigotry at any point, and that's the first time we get it. And maybe it works more as well because of the identity of the person playing the Doctor. But I really loved Ncuti's face at that moment because it was a combination of confusion, and terror and anxiety, and like almost he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't, but also caught doing something that he shouldn't, but also shouldn't be a problem at the same time.
They've addressed this already this season with race and now with his perception of sexuality. But in both cases, he's had to realize that not every time that he's landing in or every place that he's landing in is as accepting of what we would think is maybe 2025 norms.
And I think it's slightly actually linked to the part much later in the episode when Belinda calls the authorities on him for having doubts. And the thing that triggers it is, I'll get to him later, but triggers it is the sight of Rogue and the Doctor's feelings for Rogue from the episode Rogue. And that came a little bit, maybe I'm reading too much into it, of course, but almost like an allegory for, and hopefully this happens a lot less and less these days, but the allegory of men who settled down with a woman, had a kid, had a steady job, lived the proper, respectable life, but they weren't actually attracted to women. And they'd gotten older and they'd kind of had the point where you've settled down, you've kind of made your choice in life, but you end up meeting a guy who you really want to be with. And it felt like that allegory for a closeted man who realizes he can't stay married to his wife anymore. And also the understandable hurt a woman would feel with that of, so I've just tied myself to a man who, I mean, it's not that he doesn't like me, he doesn't like women, so there's no way he could like me in that way. And it's very much like the subtext, but it just didn't feel like an accident. That initial scene with Ibrahim, the homophobia there, and you tie it back. I mean, obviously, the John Smith is having doubts. You can feel the Doctor is going to burst through, but what's the enzyme that triggers it? It's the sight of Rogue. RTD himself has written a lot about various different types of the male gay experience. So it's the kind of thing that he would, be quite fairly au fait with. That felt linked together, and that scene in particular, I thought that was really gripping. That scene. So as a scene, that was probably what I liked the most. So Ken, if I come to what you liked the least from this,
the development of the Rani. We have this character that they've been holding back on now for years and years and years, and it seemed like every time there was a female antagonist, Doctor Who fandom immediately said, "That's the Rani," and then of course it wasn't the Rani until it's the Rani, like 20 years in, and we finally get her, and not only one but two of them with phenomenal casting, but we don't get any sense of the Rani's danger. What is it about her in particular that's dangerous? We know from the classic series that the Rani is a genius and does all these experiments with DNA and creating all kinds of dangerous creatures and is always meddling in something, but we don't really have a sense of that. And unfortunately, to have to keep saying, well, we have to wait till the second part of this to see what really happens, it kind of lets down part one. This was the first time where I thought in recent Doctor Who, a lot of times we would get a great buildup in this episode 7 or the second to last episode, and then maybe the follow-through and the finale wasn't exactly what we wanted. And I think this is the reverse this time. I thought that the buildup was just okay. I'm kind of hoping that the finale saves it, which I actually have pretty high confidence in him. It's over an hour long. They've gone through enormous pains to prevent spoilers from this final episode.
Just quickly before I bring you in, Rick, just something that I wasn't aware of, because obviously been a lot. I haven't properly delved into all the online reaction properly, which I think is probably for the best, to be honest. I've been very busy this weekend, but I think there has been talk about, of course, Russell's bringing something back from his childhood, Russell's going back to the past, and that's the narrative. And I just think, just for the record, at least as the official record, the reason why the Rani's back is because Ncuti requested her. And anyone who's watched Doctor Who Unleashed will already know this. He asked to have the Rani as adversary. And Russell was like, he'd always thought that was a possibility anyway, because when your lead requests it, and it's like, okay, then let's go. So that was, I think, a big reason why the Rani has come back now. So that's, I think, just important to state, because I think a lot of people have been talking online without knowledge of that. Regardless of whether it's not to contradict your point at all, Ken, It's just, why is the Rani here? Apparently because Ncuti asked for her to be.
Yeah, and I don't really have a problem with it. Obviously, I don't care which adversary returns or if they create a new one. I'm along for the ride, no matter who it's going to be. And it looks like the conclusion of this part of Wishworld was the arrival, or the hint of the arrival of Omega, which is a good adversary to bring back as well. And the Rani being a time lady, there's some sense to it. We're going to get some kind of Gallifreyan reveal, and I think that's something Russell's been building up to, everything from the Bi generation. We could probably trace a line right back to the 60th when the David Tennant specials aired, that he's had it in his mind that we have to do something with Gallifrey. We're going to hint to certain things, but we also have to address it, show it, whatever we're going to do with it. And I think that's perhaps what we're heading towards in the reality war. I also think that we've been, just by the name reality war, I think we're heading into something that is going to reveal this whole fourth wall breaking and some of those things that playing with, are we watching a television show? We've seen it a few times, and well, the finale's called the reality war. So,
okay, Rick, if I come to what you like the least from this,
this may just be a me thing. We've seen the Doctor not being the Doctor a few times before, and I generally don't like those storylines. It's like when comic books or superhero movies or whatever, they or TV shows, we're going to focus on Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent, or Superman loses his powers or whatever. And it's like, I don't care about Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent. I'm here for the superhero. And so watching John Smith, to me, is not what I'm here to see. And I thought, if it was just half the episode or whatever, that'd be fine. And there were enough glimpses that it didn't really bother me that much. But I'm so sick of the trope of our superhero protagonist loses his power, his identity, or he becomes evil or whatever. And like I said, that's probably a me thing. So I don't know if it's fair to say that it was a fault of the episode. But my wife's saying, yes, that's a you thing. I don't care for that trope.
Rick, it is a bit about taste, right? Like, that's a trope that you don't find appealing. There might be some out there that like to take the hero and put them in the most vulnerable spot.
That's why Smallville was such a successful TV show, but I didn't watch a minute of it because I watched the first episode, and went, I don't want to watch 7 seasons of Clark Kent being the farm boy.
It's one of the things where it's what you like the least, but you're also, and you just basically alluded to it, Rick, the episode probably did what it intended to do at the same time. So it's both what you like the least, but it's not necessarily a failure, an objective failure.
No, not at all. Not at all. I like to use this example sometimes. I finally watched The Godfather years ago after years of not wanting to. It was a bet. I lost a bet and I had to watch it. And I can appreciate the quality, the absolute perfection of the movie, but I hated every frame of it.
Like Ken said, it is very much taste. Like, I'm generally actually with you, Rick, on that point. In general, like, I didn't think it was bad, but I wasn't a big fan of the Human Nature Family of Blood 2-parter, where it's David Tennant is John Smith for about 95% of it. And my literal favorite part of the episode is when he becomes a doctor again. But I think that moment, I love that moment. But it was a long way to get to that moment. This didn't bother me as much just because it's clear very early on that John Smith is holding on to the John Smith identity by a fingernail. And you can see it's coming apart, which is the point. So that becomes more interesting because you're looking to see the facade unravel bit by bit. That did interest me. If it had been John Smith being just totally John Smith, then I would have been less interested. But the general trope, I definitely see a point on that. And unless your actor's a really special actor or it's really exceptional writing, generally you want to see your protagonist be the protagonist and show the personality traits that make them the protagonist. What I like the least, it's not the same as Ken's, but I think they're connected. It was essentially the expository finale. So when things get revealed. I'm glad things got revealed. That definitely had to happen. But there's a lot of different moving pieces all having to be in place just for the narrative to make any sense. And when we have the Rani giving the exposition, saying it's not just exposition, which does go on for a little while. And in these moments, and we've seen this in the penultimate episode in Doctor Who with different writers, but the feeling of dread should be building up as piece by piece gets revealed to the Doctor, and us as an audience are realizing just how fucked the Doctor is. But that emotional connection wasn't really there because I just found it was more my intellectual part of my brain was going, just trying to keep up with the plot points of like, okay, so Conrad's over there with that baby from the start, and Mrs. Flood's there, and Belinda's there, and Poppy's back with Ummy. Oh, and also Ruby and Shirley are down at the bottom of the building, and the Vindicator is getting closer to midnight. What does that mean? And we do get answers. Not that we don't get answers, but all of that stuff is happening, and I'm trying to keep that all straight in my head. Mm-hmm. John Smith is becoming the Doctor, and then you get the final reveal of Omega and the Doctor falling to, heavy quotation marks, his death. Obviously, he's not going to die. So all of that happening at once, and that was just, even the I forget the name for them, but we already mentioned them, the little alien things that are counting how much doubt there is in the world.
The Borg finger things.
Yeah. Like they're not really featuring it, but like, they're there at the same time, and so there's a lot to keep. Oh, and the Rani's talking about the connection between her and the Doctor, and them having that little dance. Russell does love to do that trope. We've seen him do it with the Master as well. So that was just
Rassilon name drop.
Yeah, the Rassilon name drop. So there's just so much to keep. And I've said this repeatedly throughout our podcast for this series. I'm not about this. Well, you can't write this because new fans won't understand what's going on. It's like, I was a new fan once. To a degree, you have to accept you won't get everything. The internet exists, you can catch up. But there was a lot of stuff being thrown at people at once. And so even so you two are more experienced in terms of your watching Doctor Who than I am. But I've watched a decent amount at this point. And even I'm just like, not so much that I don't know who these people are, because I wasn't familiar with Omega, but that's fine. I don't mind that. But trying to keep up with everything meant I couldn't almost feel anything about this section. So when the Doctor is plummeting, you're not thinking like, I think of a great episode that did it brilliantly was the Pandorica opens, when it ends with the Doctor being shut in the Pandorica. In that moment, and I know the Doctor's not dying in there, but you're thinking, or even one of Russell's episodes, Utopia? Yeah, not Utopia. No, this the next episode, the Sound of Drums.
Yeah,
and that bit where the Master has just wrecked everything, and that is a big, oh shit, this is not that the Doctor won't get out of this. Of course, they will, they always do, but you're like, oh, this is going to be tough for them. It's like the best of 7 series, and you're just in a 3-0 hole now. Well, I don't know how you're going to get out of this one, even though you obviously will. But I didn't feel any of that. Because I was just trying to keep up with everything. It was all a bit too cluttered. There was just too much. It was like you needed to Marie Kondo the scene, just clean the room out a little bit. It needs to be a little bit more clean. There was just maybe 1 or 2 things that maybe we should have kept out. Like even I just remembered, like Mel, like London's collapsing. We get a shot of Mel outside her house, and I understand. Like I'm sure we'll see her next week. So yes, we need to include her. But that's the point. We needed to include her. There's no one who was like in this sequence that I thought, I'll just get rid of them. Like, no, you do need them because they're all probably going to play some role in the narrative next week. Mm-hmm. So maybe the problem is we don't need as many people as we've seen. Like maybe just clean it out a little bit. And it does lead into there's a potential big danger. I mean, we've spoken plenty about like the RTD finale problem before, and I can see that iceberg ahead. We could have a shitload of villains next week. It reminds me of the new Superman trailer. I'm like, you can't fit all these villains into this one story, because next week we could have Omega, the Rani, Mrs. Flood, Conrad. I'll talk more about Mrs. Flood later, but that's a lot to fit in, even to an hour. Thank God, an hour, I think 2 minutes or however long it is. We're going to need every single second. That's a real concern, given what they've set up. And just the final thing before we move on to the next topic is, I don't know if it was you, Rick, or it was Emma who said this, but if it was you or it was Emma, you may be proven right about this starting with the Doctor awakening the gods, or stirring the gods, might have been the Rani's line, possibly from sprinkling the salt in Wild Blue Yonder. I don't. Was it you said that, Rick? Okay, it might have been Emma then. It might have been Emma who said that. This is when we were talking in the last series about the Doctor sprinkling that salt. That was when the vampire was invited in. We thought maybe there'd be something on that series 1. There wasn't. There might be. I mean, that this is basically the Doctor's fault for like stirring the gods. Well, when did the Doctor do this? As far as we're aware, with the information we have right now, we would think that moment in Wild Blue Yonder. So we may get like a quick flashback to that moment next week. But obviously we'll see. So if we move on to just talking about Wish World as in the world rather than just the whole episode. The world that's been created here, this alternate reality, because I think there was kind of a bit to dig into on this. If I come to you first on that, Rick.
Well, I feel like it's interesting. It's disturbing. That's kind of a lot of the problem, what you were just talking about with RTD's callbacks, is that a lot of this stuff comes from 30 years ago that I saw it when I was a teenager, but I don't remember a lot of details at this stage of the game. So right now I'm just kind of going along for the ride, trying to figure out how all of these pieces fit together. So all I have about Wish World is questions. And, you know, I did get a very Brazil vibe from it. And I don't know if that's because it's British. You know, the British view of a future dystopia kind of tends to be this sort of almost Brazil, where you've got everybody goes to work in an office and everybody is typing in front of a screen, and then they go home and they watch TV and they go to bed and then they go to the office again. And it's just sort of this repeating sequence of duty and then go home to watch 2.5 hours of television and go to bed.
You're not massively off there, and I think there's a reason for that. That is particularly British, and particularly the notion of duty, servile, unquestioning nature.
Lest anyone have ruffled feathers, Brazil is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's just this was kind of very much in that flavor, if that makes sense, except much brighter colors.
I totally see what you're saying. I think that's actually quite accurate. I mean, if you look at what they're wearing, I don't think it's an accident in terms of the costume designing. That's very deliberate, I think. If I come to you on this now, Ken?
Yeah, I thought that that the world itself was pretty well realized, and I thought that I think that there will be more to be learned when we get to the finale. Why is the Rani playing in this world? What's going on? Or is it something that's more significant, that we've actually been in this world for much longer, and it's generated in a different way. Perhaps there's a reason for it. I agree with there being a flavor of Brazil. I also kind of think a little bit of Inception, where one person's dream, there's always a person in Inception that's actually creating the world that everyone else is dreaming in. That being said, I think that Russell likes one of his tropes that he likes to go back to from time to time. It reminded me a bit of Rise of the Cybermen, Age of Steel. We arrive to a place that we're familiar with, that we're comfortable with, in this case, London, but something is not quite right. Something is off. And in Rise, we see, these Zeppelins and things like that just kind of like, wait a minute, we don't have Zeppelins. And then you have this bone castle in the center of London floating around. There's just something unusual there, and he likes that, and that's fun for the audience, because it's for me anyway. I see something and I say, oh well, okay, that this is something weird that is plopped into something that we're so familiar with. I also think there's a touch of David Lynch in there as well, with those people with the drippy fingers is very much out of the 1984 version of Dune, where you might have somebody whose eyes are sewn shut or something like that, just as sort of rando, something unsettling, something to unsettle the audience, that something here is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that comes back to like some of the production design in terms of a few more surrealist touches.
Yeah.
I think the Wish World part of Wish World is probably the best realized stuff of the episode. Like those first 20 minutes or so, I was really engaged. I thought it was very, very well realized. The slightly dystopic, nightmarish view of 2025 London, and the idea that everyone has to be so happy with everything. It reminded me a little bit of like the "everything is awesome" mantra from the Lego Movie.
Yeah.
I mean, with RTD's recent work, I think if you go back to years and years, he has been increasingly fixed on the idea of a world that is spinning out of control. It's obviously a very timely notion.
Yeah, because sometimes we look at what's going on around us and we think, did we jump a timeline here?
It just has been something that has taken up a lot of his work. I understand there will be aspects of this in his next project. One notable thing, and Russell spoke about this notable thing, and I did like also about the world, is that usually we've seen the idea before in genre fiction. Our heroes are in an alternate reality. They have been made powerless, but don't realize they're powerless, and the world is just a little bit different from the world they're used to, and it's presented as a utopia, and really it's a dystopia, and our heroes have to ultimately realize, like the Matrix, they have to realize the truth and see past that and find their way out of it. This, however, wasn't set up to keep the truth from people. This is set up for the Doctor to figure it out. The Doctor has to figure it out. All this is doing was torturing him in the meantime. But the whole point is for the Doctor to realize, like, this isn't the real world. Something is wrong. And usually these things are set up to stop people thinking things are wrong. But this is like, no, we actually need the Doctor to figure it out, but very slowly, very incrementally. And once he figures it out, his doubt grows to a level that it splits the whole world apart. I did like that. I like the idea of criminalizing doubt. I like the idea of almost of doubt being used as a power itself. So that part, as a part of Wishworld, I actually think was very well done. I mean, this is why I almost gave it a 7. And it made me think in terms of, we've already spoken about the homophobia and stuff. Obviously, sexism is heavily baked, and ableism is heavily baked into this as well. I remember, I think it was Tracy McMillan Cotton who was writing in the lead up to the most recent US general election. And she was talking about the powers of the right wing, I think people behind Project 2025 in particular. And the term she uses, these people want to cancel the 20th century. And Wishworld is basically the 20th century that's been cancelled in terms of all the movements for progressive change that have occurred are all undone.
You mentioned when you were first talking about your impressions of Wishworld is that it seems so utopian and it turns out to be dystopian. And that is the thing about trying to come up with something to impose what you think is the best answer for everyone is not always the best answer for everyone. So there are a group of people who would love to live in that 1950s idealized time, except if you were Black or a minority or this or that. There's plenty of things that you assume that many people don't realize it wasn't as utopian as we all like to think it was.
What I also noticed on the rewatch is that this is actually a world where no meaningful bonds can be forged.
Yeah, everybody's turning everyone else in for at any time.
Yeah, like Ruby and Shirley meeting is the exception. And when they are meeting, everyone else is walking in a straight line, staring straight ahead, not looking at anyone. It even comes in when, early on in the episode, when Ruby showed up at the Doctor's door, and he immediately views her with suspicion and even a little bit of disdain because she immediately doesn't present as someone from this world. If you see how she's dressed, it's immediately like an unwanted interloper at the door. And so the connections that people are having in this world actually very facile and very, the surface level, there's no depth. And when we almost get a moment of potential warmth between people, John Smith saying, Ibrahim, oh, you're a beautiful man, immediately that has to get shut down. That can't happen. That's a notable thing, that there is no, to use a very activist word like solidarity, there's none between people. That's totally been bleached out of this world, because if you had that, then you wouldn't have these very rigid hierarchies of gender and of race and of disability. You wouldn't have any of that, because we would all kind of treat each other not as equal, because we're all different, but we all treat each other as like equally deserving of a chance at life. And this world, in Conrad's mind, you cannot have a world like that. You know why it has a more scary real world overtones. And even the Run is kind of taking over this space with the point of seeing it destroyed. The world's been created to come apart, so she can get what's underneath. There is a worrying real life allegory there. Like, there are people, sadly America's now one of them, kind of where people come in, take charge, and it's like you're taking this whole place out to sell it for parts, to strip mine and sell it for parts. That's essentially what the Rani's doing.
Did you just say the U.S. isn't a place where that's happening?
No, I said the U.S. is now, I think, worrying a place where that's. So I wish I was saying it isn't. And you briefly touched on this, Ken, but I actually did like the scene, and it's a kind of scene that I'm sure was so close to getting cut out. It doesn't move the plot along. But Conrad actually working himself to exhaustion. It actually, in a way, and look, he's not going to start, but it shows the absurdity and the folly of a all caps great man trying to run everything. And the idea of, we just need a great man, I alone can fix it. Conrad is exhausted. I mean, if this world wasn't going to come apart, he would. That's why that scene was in there, to show that this And when the Doctor shows up, Conrad's all smug and arrogant. But internally, this isn't really working out for him. Because it's like, okay, apparently you think the world should be, you want it. Off you go then. And it's like, well, that's the fuckload of work. And guess what? It's incredibly tough for one person in a very authoritarian way, in a very sly authoritarian way, to determine how everyone else should live. I think that's that great line, the great monologue at the back end of season 1 of Andor.
And then remember this. The Imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks. It leaks. Authority is brittle. Oppression is the mask of fear. Remember that.
And look how much work it's taken Conrad to sustain this world that he wants. So I really like that bit was included.
I have a question that just occurred to me. I just made this connection because when we were watching it, my wife is much better at remembering details the first time around than I am. And I noticed that, and I was like, are they the security police or whatever are the same things from the Interstellar Song Contest, right?
You say that. I hadn't even thought of them. But
same here.
I'm literally thinking about that in real time. I know who you're referring to.
If not, they're real close.
When we finish recording, I will go and look back at both episodes.
Because the reason I bring that up is Conrad wasn't there for that. That makes me wonder if Conrad really is driving this whole thing or he only thinks he is.
Oh, I think to an extent that's true. Like the world is now coming apart. That definitely would have been his idea.
Oh, no. Not that. Obviously, that's the Ronnie. Yeah. But I'm wondering if maybe the Doctor or Belinda have some sort of influence here too.
I think Russell mentioned this on Unleashed, that the world itself, it's very tough you can't sustain just an entire fake world. So there are gaps. There are I imagine in Conrad's world, Ruby wouldn't even be here, or Ruby would be like his wife, his dutiful wife. Like Shirley probably wouldn't exist. There are lots of things that maybe led through, for want of a better phrase, that maybe he's not fully on top of, and because he's struggling to keep on top of what he's already doing. So the idea of that there's maybe a link between them in this and then the Interstellar Song Contest security, it might make sense. It's definitely an interesting theory, if nothing else.
I mean, it may just be, we had the costumes. It just occurred to me that I wonder if that's some sort of subtle indication.
Well, in Doctor Who, it does usually start with, we have the costumes, we have the set, what can we do with it?
Yeah.
So if we just move on now just to any additional observations that we have from this episode. So if I come to you first, Ken.
Actually, kind of back around to the overall rating is that this could go up a bit if it has set up the finale. If the finale is very satisfying and it required some of this clunky dialogue that we had going and some of the things that from the expectations that I had, that usually the lead-in is really, really exciting. There still could be an enormous payoff in the second half of this, in the reality war. And so that's really kind of my overall feeling about it, is just this curiosity. Is it going to pay off? And will I be revising the review of this based on that?
Okay, if I come to you on that then, Rick.
Kind of the same thing. Fortunately, Doctor Who has a mixed track record of sticking the landing on stuff like this. There is reason to be both optimistic and worried. I choose to take optimistic. Like you said, there's a lot of moving parts in this. There's a lot of stuff to tie up, especially if, as the Doomsayers are presaging, this is the end of RTD's tenure for this time around. Everything's got to be tied up somehow. There is a monumental, it's already done. So there has been, it's a monumental task to finish this up well. I don't have any reason to expect it won't. This episode did what it needed to do, which was make sure people will tune in next week. What the conversation will be, in 7 days, I have absolutely no idea. Which, again, that's a good thing for episodic television. If, when you've got a two-parter and that to be continued comes up, and instead of going, oh, Christ, you're like, oh, cool. I'm in the cool part right now. We'll see where we are at the end of the next one.
Well, it is true that this episode is an episode of a lot of table setting. I think it consciously gave us a lot of deliberate mystery and unanswered questions. A lot of questions to be answered next week. And while I have mentioned some of my concerns about everything that's got to be done. So far, and important just to remember that, like some people, of the brief stuff I've seen online, I think some people have forgotten that this has been a really good series so far. And even if next week isn't great, even if the reality war disappoints people, this has still been an incredibly strong series.
Oh, hell yeah.
Regardless. Some other stuff I noted down is that, so right at the beginning, this baby, God I wish, is born in Germany. And maybe it's totally unrelated, but the toy maker in The Giggle, Neil Patrick Harris, adopted a German accent.
Yeah.
The baby did give the toy maker's laugh.
So, which is that I saw the laugh and thought, oh yeah, he's come from Germany or Bavaria. So I wonder if there's a connection there. Possibly, possibly not. That might be the kind of thing for people like us to just speculate over. Belinda in this, so like her fake family, it reminded me, like, again, this is an accent, Russell going back to something done before, it's Stephen Moffat who wrote it, but Donna's fake family in The Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead two-parter. In this fictional world where she's saved, she does have a family and she comes back to the real world. She almost hopes that family was real, and she's a little bit down at the end of it. And like Belinda does fully, even though she's realizing that not everything is as it seems, and she has her own doubts, she does still seem quite attached to the family that she's created. Also with Ruby, another theme that's come up is obviously a deliberate theme of Ruby being abandoned by her adopted family. Again, in this world, it happens again. I think that's someone put online for the third time that's happened with Ruby. Something I said on our podcast on Rogue a year ago.
I would bet cash money that we see Rogue again. There is no way this is a one-time thing. The way the Doctor keeps the ring, like Rogue's ring, and they make a point of like saying they haven't killed any of them. They've just sent them to another dimension where they probably can't get back, but of course, being Doctor Who, like they always can.
And we may see him again next week. Poppy is definitely one of TV's most adorable babies.
Yeah.
and given that I think it's the last line of the episode, I think she may have some part to play in what happens next week. The fact that the Doctor makes a point of shouting that Poppy's real and that she's not fictional, and that just felt like you're not only saying that because you know we need to know that. And Belinda makes a point of saying, I have a daughter at home. Yes, Captain Poppy. We've got two babies at play. So some comments on the Rani. I do think Archie Punjabi in this role is chewing scenery like the way Kate O'Mara did, but doing it in a 2025 context. It doesn't feel like she's ripping off Kate O'Mara's performance, but she is doing it in a very flamboyant, flourishing, I mean this is a figure of speech rather than literally, but moustache twiddling way. I think she's literally having a lot of fun playing this role. I enjoy the theme that Murray Gold's, I'm assuming it's Murray Gold, that Murray Gold's done for quite Omen-esque.
Yeah.
In the cold open when the Rani's like, she has superpowers now. She can turn people into animals or into like violet petals or whatever. And then if you watch her back, you realize that each time she does that, she kisses the baby's forehead. And that's like, oh, okay, that's obviously how, I mean, it may come off as silly, but I think as you always say, Rick, whatever the rule is, do the rule and stick with it, which to be fair, they have done. It's like, kiss the baby on the forehead and you can basically do anything. Like that's the wish. That's rubbing the lamp. Mrs. Flood is kind of, someone said this in the week, it looks like Mrs. Flood's going to be the Igor in this partnership. Her annoyance at seemingly being pushed in the position of being like the Igor to Rani's Dr. Frankenstein, I feel that's coming through next week. That was like another scene where I'm like, okay, remember that. That's a scene.
You don't keep Mrs. Flood around unless there's more significance. It wouldn't surprise me if Mrs. Flood is the one pulling the strings, the one who's allowing themselves to let other people think they're in control. He's been the chess master through, the whole season, 2 seasons.
I think she definitely will have a significant part to play next week. And I say that so-and-so has a significant part to play next week. It's like, that's what I mean. That's a lot of significant people who like almost have to do stuff rather than just almost letting the narrative progress and characterization progress naturally. I briefly mentioned this last week, and it's something that came through in Doctor Unleashed. It does bear mentioning here is the depiction of South Asians in this episode. Someone said online, it was a great point, that it is good that the Rani, with a name like that, is being played by a South Asian. Archie Punjabi spoke about being cast, and part of the reason what she was attracted to it is because Rani apparently in India means queen. I'm not sure what specific. I don't know if it's Bengali or Hindi or whatever, but apparently it means queen. And she said one of the reasons she took it is she thought of her Indian community and what that would mean, that she would be playing someone whose character is called the queen in terms of her own heritage. That was the only reason, of course, but that was a big part of the character that appealed to her. And Radha Setu said this, that Archie Punjabi, she met her as an actor, means a lot to South Asian. She's a hero of Radha's but she's an Emmy winner. She's one of those actors that kind of went to America and cracked America. She's a big deal, even though she hasn't taken a lot of really significant roles in the UK. But because of her work in The Good Wife, because of what she did in America, that means, it's a big deal. Like, yeah, Archie out there in America, big show in America, winning Emmys. And I didn't really think of that as much as I maybe should have done until I watched that bit Unleashed. But that's a big deal because, Doctor Who, with some justification, some criticism for its depictions of people of colour in the show down the years. And often it has centred heavily on its poor representation of black people. But its representation of South Asians, I'll be honest with you, they're a massive diaspora in the UK and they don't feature in our pop culture anywhere near as much as they should. They're often very much sidelined, even though there's so many of them in the UK. So it's not even like, there's not many of them. There's a shitload. An analogy I'd always use in America is, Latino to America is South Asian to the UK. They should be featured more in our pop culture sphere, not just Doctor Who. But the fact that you think of this series Doctor Who and the final scene of Doctor Who, and you have 5 or 6 characters, and 2 of them are South Asian, Ryder and Archie, and that in and of itself, regardless of the quality of the episode, I definitely think is something of a landmark that should be noted, because I don't think it's ever happened before. I know there was the partition episode, what is it? Teams of the Punjab?
It was a Jodie episode, yeah.
Yes.
It was amazing, because, and we talked about this at the time, I had no idea that even happened. This side of the world doesn't get a whole lot of the granular detail of the history of that side of the world.
Yeah. I think, as I said at the time, a lot of people in the UK don't know that happened, as well as the US. But, yes, you're right, we had that episode. But then beyond that, I don't think it's ever happened before. And 2 characters of such consequence, for now at least, main antagonist and the companion. It's not just a character of the week that we'll never see again. Like, whatever happens with this, these are 2 significant characters in Doctor Who history now. So if we just come to your episode MVP now, please, Ken.
Ruby Sunday. The character, for me, was kind of the link to whatever was going on. And she's just incredible in general. A character that has grown on me a lot and just really worked for me in this. And every single cameo, because we got a whole lot in here, from Rogue to Susan again. Thing is loaded up. Susan Twist is in this. It's filled. It's like the greatest hits of Russell on Disney.
Oh, yes. We didn't mention Susan at all. She surely is playing some part next week. And Susan, I actually listened to that. Susan Twist is the tea lady in Unit. Unit. And that comes back to that very good joke from the last series of, did you make the tea? Don't make the tea. But in this world, yes, Susan's making the tea. Rick, we can have your episode MVP.
I almost said Poppy, but I think, despite what I said earlier, I've got to give it to Ncuti, because his portrayal of the Doctor as John Smith, fighting against being John Smith, the transitions between, oh yeah, I'm John Smith, no problem, to, am I? Who am I? How does this work? Something's wrong. Ncuti just played it beautifully all the way through, flawlessly. And damn, that dude can wear a suit. I got to give him credit for the umbrella toss, whatever you call that, because he must have done it like 5 times, and every time he did it was like, that is just perfect.
Yes, he's also my MVP. It's kind of a regular thing for me most weeks. So slightly reinforce what you said, Rick. His gradual change from John Smith, the Doctor, in the final sequence, that's really well executed, because he starts with John Smith, but you can just start to see the Doctor bit by bit by bit start to come through. It's, like Wishworld itself, it's gradual, it's incremental, and when it's there, it's there. And he didn't even have to say when he became the Doctor again. I know he did, he does, but I could see it in terms of his movements, how he held himself, his face, his voice. it was like, oh, okay, he's the Doctor again, or he's almost there, but he's not there yet. That is not an easy thing to do. Like, he signaled all the right emotions at the right time. And I think of his portrayal of this character, I think he's often been the most effective in like moments of reaction and of and expressions where he's not speaking, of different types of expressions. Sometimes it's happiness, sometimes anger, sometimes it's terror, sometimes it's worry, sometimes it's shock. But when he's actually not that he can't deliver dialogue, but he's really effective in those moments in between. He does have such incredible presence. And it would demonstrate, I mean, I've already mentioned the scene, the bit I like the most, all those emotions flashing across his face when Ibrahim confronts him, and in the final scene, and the scene when the doubts really start to come through. I think he's having like a whiskey or something, and he's just him at the table, and he's racked with turmoil, and he's not saying anything. Particularly in this world where attention spans can be hard to grab, it shows how much trust that he's earned, trust they have in him. That like, no, we don't need to say anything here. You can do all this without speaking, and yeah, he did it very effectively. He did both John Smith and the Doctor very effectively in the transition between them. I also thought it was excellent. So that's why he's my MVP. Okay, so yes, if you have any thoughts on what we've just spoken about, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. That's analysing spelled with an S. And we are across social media at Analysing DW. So Rick, Ken, thanks for both being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week to analyse the reality war. Until next time.
Our logo was courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.